Hey, you can't park here. This is a tow-away zone for judges only.
Young man, look closely at the placard. I am late for my docket.
I don't care about your placard. Move this vehicle or I'm writing a citation.
I am Judge Sterling. This is my assigned spot. I suggest you check your roster.
Yeah, right, and I'm the mayor. Step away from the car. Let me see.
The body cam recording captured everything you just saw, but what it couldn't capture was the collective gasp of horror that would soon echo through the halls of city government. At that exact moment, standing on the sun-baked pavement of the county courthouse, Officer Kyle Trent had absolutely no idea that he was effectively signing his own resignation letter. He looked at the man in the flowing black robes and saw only a challenge to his authority, a target for a citation that would prove he was doing his job. He didn't see the decades of legal precedents, the Stanford law degree, or the fact that this man's name was etched in brass on the very building standing 20 feet behind them. Judge Marcus Sterling wasn't just a visitor. He was the presiding judge of the Superior Court, a man known for his piercing intellect and absolute intolerance for incompetence in his courtroom. Most people would have panicked when a police officer started shouting, but Sterling stood his ground with the terrifying calm of a man who knows exactly how the law works because he writes the rulings. Officer Trent was about to learn a very expensive lesson in situational awareness, one that would cost his department $2, $9 million, and end his career before his probation was even up. Before we dive deeper into this disaster, I need you to do something right now. Head down to the comments and answer this. If you were in that judge's position, wearing your work uniform in your own assigned parking spot, how would you have reacted? Would you have stayed calm like Judge Sterling, or would you have lost it? Type calm or angry below. And if you believe bad policing needs to be exposed, hit that subscribe button. You do not want to miss the settlement details at the end of this video. To understand just how catastrophic this mistake was, you have to understand the man standing next to the black sedan. Judge Marcus Sterling was not a man who sought the spotlight, but his reputation in the legal community was nothing short of legendary. Born in Atlanta during the height of the civil rights movement, Sterling had dedicated his entire life to the pursuit of justice. He had spent 15 years as a public defender fighting for the indigent and the voiceless before transitioning to the bench where he had served with distinction for over 2 decades. His accolades were numerous and impressive. He was the first African American to be elected presiding judge in the county's history. He had authored landmark opinions on Fourth Amendment rights that were cited by the state Supreme Court. He was a mentor to hundreds of young lawyers and was known for a judicial temperament that was firm but fair. In his courtroom, decorum was paramount. He demanded preparation, respect, and above all, adherence to the Constitution. Outside the courtroom, he was a pillar of the community, serving on the boards of 3 local nonprofits and teaching constitutional law at the Knight University. On this particular Tuesday morning, Judge Sterling was operating on a tight schedule. He had a heavy docket ahead of him, a murder trial that had drawn national media attention and a series of complex pretrial motions. He was focused, prepared, and in game mode. He had driven his personal vehicle, a meticulously maintained black Mercedes S-Class, to the courthouse just as he had done every workday for 20 years. He parked in spot number 1, the spot explicitly reserved for the presiding judge, marked with a metal placard that he passed every single morning. He wasn't looking for trouble. He was looking for his coffee and his case files, ready to do the people's work. He stepped out of his car, robes already on to save time, a common practice for judges running late. He was essentially at his office, in his zone, completely unprepared for the storm that was about to descend in the form of a 23-year-old rookie with a ticket book and a chip on his shoulder. The setting for the incident was deceptively mundane. The courthouse parking lot was a sprawling expanse of concrete, but the front row was distinct. It was lined with signs clearly marked reserved for judiciary and tow-away zone. The morning light was bright and harsh, casting long shadows against the brutalist architecture of the courthouse. It was 8:30 a.m., the rush hour for legal professionals. Attorneys were hurrying up the steps, clerks were balancing stacks of files, and the city was waking up. Judge Sterling pulled his Mercedes into the first spot, the one closest to the entrance. He turned off the engine, gathered his leather briefcase, and grabbed his travel mug of coffee. He checked his watch. He had exactly 15 minutes before he needed to take the bench. It was a routine he could execute in his sleep. Enter Officer Kyle Trent. Trent was fresh out of the academy, barely 3 months into his probationary period. He was young, eager, and unfortunately deeply insecure about his new authority. He had been assigned a perimeter patrol, a task usually reserved for rookies to keep them out of trouble. But Trent saw it differently. He saw it as his territory. He had spent the morning pacing the lot, looking for expired tags or illegal parking, desperate to get his citation numbers up to impress his field training officer. When he saw the sleek black luxury car pull into the prime spot, something triggered his bias. He didn't see a judge. He saw a wealthy driver thinking the rules didn't apply to them. He didn't check the license plate, which would have come back registered to a judicial officer. He didn't look at the dashboard permit. He just saw a violation. Trent began jogging across the lot, his hand already reaching for his electronic ticket writer. He was running on adrenaline and assumption, a dangerous cocktail for a police officer. As he approached, he saw the driver step out, an older black man. In Trent's limited experience and flawed worldview, this didn't compute as a judge. It computed as someone who was lost, or worse, someone who was defiant. Sterling was locking his door when he heard the shout. It wasn't a polite inquiry. It was a barked command. "Officer Trent, hey! You can't park here. This is a tow-away zone for judges only." Sterling paused. He turned slowly, the morning sun reflecting off his reading glasses. He looked at the young officer, then at the sign, then back at the officer. The confusion on his face was genuine. "Judge Sterling, young man, look closely at the placard. I am late for my docket." The dynamic shifted instantly. In a courtroom, when Judge Sterling spoke, the room went silent. But here, on the pavement, Officer Trent wasn't listening. He was escalating. This is a classic psychological trap for inexperienced officers. Once they issue a command, they feel they cannot retreat without losing face, even when the facts scream that they are wrong. "Officer Trent, I don't care about your placard. Move this vehicle or I'm writing a citation." Beat Sterling's brow furrowed. He wasn't angry yet. He was incredulous. He shifted his briefcase to his left hand, his robes rustling in the slight breeze. He was trying to give the boy a chance, a way out of the abyss he was walking into. "Judge Sterling, I am Judge Sterling. This is my assigned spot. I suggest you check your roster." Trent stepped closer, invading the judge's personal space. He was posturing, chest out, hand resting on his belt near his taser. He was so focused on asserting dominance that he missed the obvious visual cue. The man was wearing judicial robes. "Officer Trent, yeah, right, and I'm the mayor. Step away from the car, let me see ID." Judge Sterling stood perfectly still. His internal legal mind was already cataloging the violations. Terry v. Ohio requires reasonable suspicion. Delaware v. Prowse prohibits arbitrary stops. There was no suspicion here, only hubris. "Judge Sterling, you are attempting to detain a presiding judge in his own parking lot?" Trent's face turned red. He felt mocked. To him, this wasn't an explanation. It was resistance. He didn't hear the warning. He heard a challenge. He dropped his ticket book on the hood of the Mercedes, a violation of policy in itself, and reached for his radio, though he didn't key it up yet. "Officer Trent, that's it. Obstructing an officer. Hands on the hood now." Dramatic music swell. The sheer absurdity of the moment was reaching its peak. Attorneys walking up the courthouse steps stopped dead in their tracks. A clerk dropped her files. Everyone froze. They recognized Judge Sterling. They knew exactly who he was, and they were watching a rookie cop threaten to arrest the most powerful man in the building. "Judge Sterling's son, you just resigned from the force. The chief is watching from that window." Sterling pointed a steady finger toward the third-floor office of the chief of police, which overlooked the lot. But Trent was past the point of return. He lunged forward, grabbing the sleeve of Sterling's robe. "Officer Trent, I said hands on the hood. Do it now or you're going to the ground." Sterling pulled his arm back with surprising strength. He didn't strike the officer. He simply disallowed the contact. "Judge Sterling, do not touch me. You have no probable cause. You are committing an assault under color of authority. Officer Trent, stop resisting. Turn around. Trent unholstered his taser, the yellow plastic weapon leveled at the chest of a man who had sworn in the mayor 3 months prior. The red laser dot danced on the black fabric of the judicial robe. Have you ever seen someone double down when they were clearly wrong? It's painful to watch. Type yes if you know someone like this. Judge Sterling, if you deploy that weapon, you will face federal charges. Look at my identification. It is on the dashboard. Officer Trent, I'm not looking at anything until you are in cuffs. Sterling maintained eye contact. He didn't raise his hands in surrender, but he didn't make aggressive moves. He stood like a statue of the law itself, immovable, resolute. Judge Sterling, you are making a mistake that you cannot undo. Officer, read the name on the sign. Read the name on the placard. Connect the dots. Trent hesitated. The laser wavered. For a split second, doubt crept into his eyes. But the adrenaline was screaming louder than his logic. He reholstered the taser and grabbed for his handcuffs. Officer Trent, turn around. You are under arrest for failure to obey a lawful order. Judge Sterling, there is nothing lawful about this order, but proceed. Let the record reflect I am complying under duress. Sterling turned slowly, placing his hands behind his back. The click of the handcuffs ratcheting shut on the wrists of a superior court judge was a sound that would haunt the city's legal department for years. Trent tightened them, feeling triumphant. He had won. He had subdued the suspect. Officer Trent, you can explain it to the sergeant inside. Judge Sterling, I intend to explain it to the entire circuit court. The walk from the parking lot to the courthouse holding cells was short, but it felt like a funeral procession. Officer Trent marched Judge Sterling through the side entrance, usually reserved for prisoner transport. The sensory details were jarring, the smell of the judge's spilled coffee still lingering on the pavement, the cold metal of the handcuffs biting into his skin, the hum of the metal detectors. As they entered the intake area, the atmosphere changed instantly. This wasn't a police station. It was the courthouse holding facility, staffed by sheriff's deputies who knew every judge by face, name, and coffee order. When Trent pushed open the heavy steel doors, pushing a handcuffed man in robes ahead of him, the room went dead silent. Deputy Miller, a 20-year veteran sitting at the desk, dropped his sandwich. He stood up slowly, his eyes wide. Officer, Miller said, his voice trembling. What are you doing? Brought in a 148, Trent said, panting slightly, still riding his adrenaline high. Refused to move his car from a reserved spot. Resisted arrest. Miller looked at Sterling. Sterling looked at Miller. Officer, Sterling said calmly, would you please inform this deputy who I am? He says he's a judge, Trent scoffed. Says he's Judge Sterling. Miller walked around the desk. He didn't reach for his weapon. He reached for his keys. You idiot, Miller whispered, his face pale. That is Judge Sterling. Trent froze. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like he might faint. He looked at the man he had handcuffed, the robes, the sign, the name. The pieces finally slammed together in his mind with the force of a freight train. Unlock him, Miller barked. Unlock him right now. Trent's hands shook violently as he fumbled with the key. It took him 3 tries to get it into the keyhole. When the cuffs popped open, Sterling rubbed his wrists, wincing slightly. He didn't shout. He didn't curse. He simply adjusted his robes, straightened his tie, and looked at Trent with a mixture of pity and steel. Deputy Miller, Sterling said, his voice echoing in the concrete room. Please call the chief of police and the district attorney. Tell them I am in holding and I have been assaulted. The chain reaction was instantaneous. Radios crackled. Phones rang. The watch commander sprinted down the hallway. Within 5 minutes, the intake room was filled with high-ranking brass. The chief of police, who had indeed been in his office, arrived breathless, his face a mask of horror. Judge Sterling, the chief stammered. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything, Chief, Sterling replied, picking up his briefcase. Just ensure this officer is relieved of duty immediately. I have a murder trial to preside over. I am now 20 minutes late. Sterling turned and walked out of the holding cell, heading toward the elevators to his chambers. He didn't look back at Trent, who was now sitting on a bench, head in his hands, realizing his life as he knew it was over. Do you think the sheriff's deputy should have arrested the rookie cop on the spot for assault? Let me know your thoughts below. Judge Sterling took the bench 30 minutes late. He apologized to the jury for the delay, citing an administrative issue, and proceeded to hear the morning's motions with his usual razor-sharp focus. But while the courtroom was calm, the city administration was in meltdown. Sterling didn't go to the press. He went to his chambers during recess and dictated a memorandum to the city attorney. It wasn't a request. It was a notification of pending litigation. By that afternoon, he had retained a high-profile civil rights firm. The lawsuit was filed within 48 hours. The complaint was 50 pages long, detailing false arrest, excessive force, assault, battery, and violation of civil rights under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983. The media got wind of it by Wednesday. The headline, "Rookie Arrest Judge," was too juicy to ignore. When the Bodycam footage was released via a FOIA request, the internet exploded. The video went viral globally, racking up millions of views on TikTok and YouTube. Viewers were appalled by the arrogance of the officer and awestruck by the judge's composure. The internal affairs investigation was brutal and swift. Usually these things take months. This took days. Investigators pulled Trent's academy records and found notes about his difficulty with authority and impulsiveness. They interviewed the deputies in the holding cell. They reviewed the security footage from the parking lot, which showed Sterling clearly pointing to the sign. The statistics were pulled. It turned out Trent had issued 20 citations in his first month, mostly in low-income neighborhoods. But this stop exposed a deeper rot. The investigation concluded that Trent had engaged in bias-based policing, assuming that a black man in a luxury car could not possibly be a judge, despite all visual evidence to the contrary. The report was scathing. It cited Trent for incompetence, insubordination, unlawful detention, and conduct unbecoming. It noted that he had bypassed every opportunity to de-escalate and had ignored verifiable exculpatory evidence: the sign, the placard, the ID, and the robes. Officer Kyle Trent was terminated on Friday, 4 days after the incident. Because he was still on probation, he had no union protection, no arbitration, and no appeal rights. He was simply fired. The chief of police signed the letter personally. Trent's name was added to the state's do not hire registry, effectively ending his law enforcement career permanently. But firing Trent wasn't enough to stop the bleeding. The Department of Justice took notice. They opened a preliminary inquiry into the department's training practices, specifically regarding bias and de-escalation. The city knew they were staring down the barrel of a federal consent decree if they didn't act fast. The settlement negotiations were the shortest in the city's history. The city attorney knew that putting Judge Sterling on the stand in front of a jury would be a massacre. Sterling was a professional witness. He knew how to dismantle a defense. The city offered $9 million to settle the civil rights lawsuit. Sterling accepted, but the settlement came with strings attached, strings that Sterling insisted on. The decree mandated a complete overhaul of the department's probationary training program. It required all new hires to undergo 40 hours of implicit bias training. It established a new oversight board for rookie officers. Judge Sterling took the $9 million, and in a move that surprised no one who knew him, established the Sterling Justice Initiative, a foundation dedicated to providing legal defense for those wrongly accused of crimes by the police. "I had the robe, the education, and the status to survive that encounter," Sterling said in a statement. "Most people do not. This money will help level the playing field." Officer Trent was last heard of moving back to his hometown in another state, working in construction. He refused all requests for interviews. This story matters because it strips away the excuses often made for bad policing. Judge Sterling had every advantage a citizen could possibly have. He was in his designated spot. He was calm. He was compliant. He was literally wearing the uniform of the law. And yet, none of that protected him from the bias and incompetence of a single officer. and still this happened. That is the phrase that should chill us all. If a presiding judge can be handcuffed for parking in his own spot, imagine what happens to the nurse coming home from a night shift or the student driving to class. Imagine those without the power to call the chief, those without the legal knowledge to protect their rights. Accountability was swift here only because the victim was powerful. That is the uncomfortable truth. Most cases don't end with a $9 million check and a foundation. They end with a criminal record for the innocent. We have to demand a system where respect is the default, not a privilege reserved for judges. I want to know what you think is the biggest lesson here. Is it that rookies need better training? Or is it that bias is built into the system? Let me know in the comments. If you want to see more stories where the system actually gets checked, hit that like button and share this video. It helps us keep the lights on and the stories coming. See you in the next one.